The girl stumbled into his yard at dusk, blood soaking through the torn fabric of her dress, her bare feet leaving crimson prints in the dust. Jacob Thornfield didn't move from his porch, just watched her collapse near his water trough, her dark hair spilling like ink across the weathered wood. "Please," she whispered, her voice barely carrying over the evening wind. "They're coming." He should have turned away, should have gone inside, bolted the door, pretended he'd never seen her. But something in the way she clutched her side, the desperate tilt of her head as she looked up at him, made his boots carry him down those 3 wooden steps. "Who's coming?" His voice came out rougher than he'd intended. "The men who killed my mother." She tried to stand, swayed, caught herself against the trough. Water sloshed, mixing pink with her blood. She said to find you if anything happened." Jacob's jaw tightened. "Don't know who you think I am, girl, but Jacob Thornfield." She said his name like a prayer, like salvation. She said you'd help. The words hit him like a fist to the chest. Nobody had spoken his full name in years. Out here, 20 miles from the nearest town, he was just the rancher who kept to himself, who paid his bills in cash and asked no questions. The kind of man who'd earned his solitude through choices he couldn't undo. She was wrong. He took a step back, hands raised. "I don't help nobody." But even as he said it, his eyes caught on something glinting at her throat. A thin chain, mostly hidden beneath her torn collar. His mouth went dry. "My mother said you knew her once." The girl's knees buckled, and she slid down the side of the trough. "In Laredo, before the war." Laredo. The name carved through him like a blade, bringing with it the scent of jasmine and the sound of laughter he'd spent 15 years trying to forget. He'd left that town with blood on his hands and promises he couldn't keep, riding hard into a life where the past couldn't follow. Until now, thunder rolled across the horizon, though no clouds marked the sky. Not thunder, hoofbeats, coming fast, coming hard, and the girl's eyes went wide with terror that made her look even younger than she already was. "Please," she breathed, "don't let them find me." Jacob's hands trembled as he stared down at her. 15 years of careful distance, of building walls around his heart, and this slip of a girl threatened to tear it all down with a single word. "Laredo. How many are coming?" The question left his mouth before he could stop it. 4, maybe 5. She pressed harder against her wounded side. "They burned our house, shot her while she was still in her nightgown." The smart thing would be to put her on a horse, point her toward town, let the sheriff sort it out. But the smart thing wouldn't explain why his chest felt hollow, why his scars ached in the gathering darkness, why her face looked familiar in ways that made his hands shake. "Get inside." The words came out like gravel. "You'll help." "I'll think about it." He helped her to her feet, noticing how small her hands were, how she favored her left leg. Inside, by lamplight, she looked even younger, 16, maybe 17, with eyes the color of creek water after rain. The same eyes that had haunted his dreams for more years than he cared to count. "What's your name?" He poured water into a basin, found clean cloth in his meager supplies. "Elena." She winced as he cleaned the blood from her hands. "Elena Vasquez." Vasquez. The name didn't hit him like a bullet, it hit him like an avalanche, sudden, crushing, burying him under the weight of memories he'd sworn to forget. Maria Vasquez, dancing in a cantina while he played cards in the corner. Maria, whispering his name in the darkness of her room above the saloon. Maria, crying as he rode away, choosing duty over love, choosing the war over her. "Your mother," he said carefully. "What was her name?" "Maria." Elena's voice broke on the syllable. "She never talked about my father, but she kept his letters, said he was a good man who made bad choices." The room spun. Jacob gripped the edge of the table, fought to keep breathing. Letters. He'd written her letters, in those first months after he left, long desperate things full of promises he couldn't keep, and explanations that never felt like enough. He'd stopped writing when the war got ugly, when he realized he was becoming the kind of man who couldn't go home to a woman like Maria. "She's not my daughter," he said to the empty air, the words automatic, defensive. But even as he said it, He was cataloguing Elena's features, the stubborn set of her jaw, the way she held her shoulders straight despite the pain, the impossible green of her eyes. Outside, the hoofbeats grew louder, dust clouded the windows, and Jacob could hear voices, rough, demanding, the kind of men who set fires and asked questions later. Elena's hand found his arm. "They'll kill you too, if they find me here." He looked down at her fingers, so small against his weathered skin, and saw the thin chain around her neck catch the lamplight. His breath stopped. Hanging from that chain was a silver locket, tarnished with age, but unmistakable. He'd bought it in San Antonio, traded his grandfather's watch for it, given it to Maria the night before he left for the war. The locket he'd never expected to see again. The first shot shattered his front window. Jacob threw Elena to the floor, glass raining down around them like deadly stars. Outside, horses snorted and men shouted orders, their voices sharp with violence and certainty. "Jacob Thornfield." The voice cut through the night like a whip. "We know you got the girl." He crawled to the window, peered through the jagged hole. 4 riders sat their horses in his yard, silhouetted against the dying light. The leader wore a marshal's badge that caught the lamplight, but Jacob had seen enough crooked lawmen to know the difference between justice and revenge. "This is Marshal Pike. Send out the girl, and we'll make this quick." Elena pressed against the wall beside him, her breathing shallow and fast. Blood had soaked through the bandage he'd wrapped around her ribs, but her eyes held steady. No tears, no begging, just the same quiet strength he'd seen in her mother's face all those years ago. "What did you do?" he whispered. "I saw them kill her." Elena's voice was barely a breath. "I hid in the root cellar, watched through the slats. The Marshal Pike, he had a letter, one of yours. He kept asking her where you were." Jacob's blood turned to ice. The letters, after all these years they'd finally caught up to him, but not the way he'd expected. "Why?" The word tore from his throat. "The bank job in Amarillo. She said you were innocent, but Pike didn't believe her. Said if she wouldn't tell him where you were hiding, he'd make sure everyone who ever helped you paid the price." Amarillo. 3 men had robbed that bank, killed a teller, gotten away clean. Jacob had been 200 miles away, driving cattle to market, but he'd been in the town just weeks before, close enough for suspicion, far enough away that he couldn't prove his innocence. Another shot punched through the wall above their heads, sending splinters flying. "Thornfield, I got all night." Jacob's hands found his rifle, muscle memory guiding him even as his mind reeled. Elena was his daughter, had to be. The timing was right, the eyes were right, and Maria had never been one to lie, but knowing it and accepting it were different things entirely. "The back door," he whispered. "There's a trail that leads to the creek. Follow it downstream, find the old bridge. Town's another mile past that. I'm not leaving you. You are, if you want to live." Elena's hand closed around the locket at her throat. "She died protecting you. I won't let that be for nothing." The words hit him harder than bullets. Maria, dead because of letters he'd written in loneliness and guilt, because he'd been too weak to stay away, too selfish to let her forget him completely. Thunder cracked overhead, real thunder this time, heavy with the promise of rain. In the distance lightning split the sky, illuminating the faces of the men who'd come to kill them both. Pike's voice carried over the wind. "Burn it down, boys. Smoke 'em out." The smell of kerosene drifted through the broken window, followed by the hungry crackle of flames taking hold. Smoke filled the room like bitter fog, stinging Jacob's eyes and burning his throat. The fire had caught the front wall, orange tongues licking hungrily at the dry wood. They had minutes before the whole place went up. "This way." He grabbed Elena's hand, pulled her toward the back door, but she resisted, her fingers tangling in the chain around her neck. "Wait." She fumbled with the locket's clasp, her hands shaking. "I need you to see." "Not now." "Yes, now." The words came out fierce, desperate. "Before we die in here, I need you to know." The locket opened with a soft click. Inside, protected by tarnished silver, were 2 photographs. One showed Maria as Jacob remembered her, young, beautiful, her eyes bright with laughter. The other showed a man with weathered hands and kind eyes, wearing a Union Army uniform. Jacob stared at his own face, 20 years younger, unmarked by guilt and loneliness. Maria had kept his picture all these years, right next to her heart. She loved you. Elena's voice was soft despite the chaos around them. Even after you left, even when the town called her names for loving a soldier, she said you were the only man who ever looked at her like she was worth something. The words broke something inside him that had been frozen for 15 years. He pulled Elena against his chest, felt her small frame shake with exhaustion and fear, and for the first time since Laredo, let himself feel what it meant to have family. "I'm sorry," he whispered into her dark hair. "I'm so damn sorry. She forgave you long ago." Elena pulled back, looked up at him with Maria's eyes. She said, "Some choices are too hard for any one person to make alone." The back wall caught fire with a whoosh that made them both jump. Heat pressed against them like a living thing, driving them toward the door. But before Jacob could move, Elena pressed something into his palm, a letter worn soft with handling. "She wanted you to have this, if anything ever happened to her." Jacob's hands shook as he unfolded the paper. Maria's careful script, faded but still legible. "Jacob, if you are reading this, then I am gone, and our daughter has found you. I never told her who you were, because I wanted her to love you for the man you are, not the father you couldn't be. Take care of her. She has your stubborn heart, and my foolish hope. That should be enough to see her through whatever comes. Love doesn't end just because people leave. It just learns to wait." Rain began to fall, heavy drops hissing against the burning walls. Through the smoke and flames, Jacob could see Pike and his men taking shelter under the porch overhang, their attention focused on the front of the house. Elena squeezed his hand. "She believed you'd come back someday." I guess she was right. For the first time in years, Jacob Thornfield smiled. They slipped out the back as the roof collapsed, moving through the rain like ghosts. The storm that had been building all evening finally broke, washing the smoke from the air and turning the dry earth to mud. Lightning illuminated their path to the creek, and thunder covered the sound of their footsteps. Pike and his men waited until dawn to realize they'd escaped. By then, Jacob and Elena were 20 miles away, riding double on his old sorrel toward the territorial line. She'd said nothing about the tears on his face, as they'd watched his house burn from the ridge above. Some griefs were too private for words. "Where will we go?" she asked as the sun crested the mountains. "North, maybe Montana. I got friends up there who don't ask questions." And after that, Jacob was quiet for a long moment, feeling the weight of her against his back, the way she trusted him to carry them both toward whatever came next. "After that, we figure out how to be a family." The words felt strange on his tongue, foreign after so many years of solitude, but Elena's hand found his, squeezed once, and suddenly they didn't feel strange at all. They rode through the morning, stopping only to rest the horse and share the last of his supplies. Elena told him about Maria's final years, how she'd opened a small shop, taught reading to the local children, never remarried despite offers from decent men, how she'd spoken of Jacob on quiet evenings, her voice soft with memory rather than bitterness. "She said you'd write her letters in your head," Elena said as they watered the horse at a creek. "Long conversations you were too proud to put on paper." She wasn't wrong. Jacob watched the water flow over smooth stones, carrying away the dust of yesterday. "I had a lot to say to her. You can tell me instead, if you want." He looked at his daughter, and she was his daughter, no denying it now, and saw Maria's generous heart reflected in her young face, the same capacity for forgiveness, the same stubborn hope that love could survive anything. "I'd like that," he said. They reached the border 3 days later, 2 riders against the endless sky, carrying nothing but each other and the promise of time. Pike would look for them, but the territory was vast, and Jacob had learned long ago how to disappear when he needed to. Years later, in a small valley in Montana, where the grass grew tall and the winters were clean, Elena would tell her own children about the rancher who found his daughter in the ashes of his old life,
How he taught her to read the weather and gentle horses and see the beauty in sunrise over distant mountains. How he never spoke of the past except to say that some mistakes take a lifetime to forgive, but love, real love, waits as long as it takes. And sometimes, when the light fell just right through the kitchen window, she'd touch the silver locket at her throat, and remember the night her father came home to her, guided by rain and redemption, and the patient heart of a woman who knew that the best stories always begin with the words, "I'm sorry, and I love you, and I'm never leaving again." The locket still held their pictures, Maria and Jacob young and hopeful and believing in forever, but now it held something else too, the quiet satisfaction of promises finally kept, and love that had learned to wait.